My name is Naina Gupta, and I am the Associate Director of Policy at the National Immigrant Justice Center. I am so excited to welcome you to our Chance to Come Home campaign launch. Today is about those who the United States has deported, people who lived in the US for years or decades, torn from their loved ones. They have faced the brunt of the injustices and imperfections of the US immigration system. Deportation is almost always grossly unfair. Many deported people are stranded abroad, even though they have strong claims to lawful status in the United States. The unjustly deported include U.S. military veterans, civil rights activists, former DACA recipients, and a disproportionate number of Black and Brown immigrants. NIJC and a group of 10 deported individuals, alongside their families, members of Congress, dozens of organizations, and advocates around the world, are launching a campaign making a simple ask. Give people who have been unjustly deported a meaningful chance to come home. Concurrent with this event, today we have launched our Chance to Come Home campaign website at immigrantjustice.org/chance to come home. We invite you to visit and dive into the stories featured there and join us in speaking out to demand their return home. In a few moments, we will premiere an important short film, but first, I'm thrilled to turn to U.S. Senator Cory Booker, who just this week chimed in with his support for our Chance to Come Home campaign and the policy ask at its heart. Senator Booker?
Look, we have a real problem. We have people being deported from the United States, being separated from their family, their loved ones, their communities. And these folks who have been deported have strong legal grounds for remaining in this country. We know folks are being deported in ways that are just grossly unfair, that don't sit with the values of us as Americans. I mean, imagine being deported when you're having ongoing litigation, being deported when you have reasons, legitimate ones, to stay, or being deported for some years ago nonviolent legal issue like possession of marijuana that suddenly catches up to you, or being deported because you were protesting the previous administration about the conditions of detention. This does not sit with our values. We are a nation that understands that so many folks, many of whom we've deported, have so much value. They're part of our community. They have families here, children or parents. Many of them have served in our military, have made vast contributions to their communities, have contributed to our economies. I've worked very hard in the criminal justice space. We passed legislation making our criminal justice system more just and fair in a bipartisan manner. But I'll tell you what, we need to do more of that same kind of work with the same kind of spirit to rationalize our broken immigration system. Actually, to bring common sense and our common values to not deport people who then it's going to have an impact on their American children. It's not going to have an impact on the companies that they help run. It's not going to have an impact, really, on who we say we are. People that have a legitimate connection to our country, who have made extraordinary contributions and still are even working through our legal system, they have a right to stay. And this is why I'm going to continue to fight for a single central unit within the Department of Homeland Security to process and better consider the requests that folks have not to be deported. This Chance to Come Home Act is so important, and I want to talk to you more about that at some other point. But now, we need to make sure that the DHS can do the things necessary to support the values of our nation. It's time to expand the opportunity so that families that you'll hear from today, their stories, their truths, their call to our conscience, as well as to our intellect and common sense, that these folks are not unjustly deported, separated from their loved ones. There are ways to do this, to do it right, to do it in accordance with our values and our best interests, and to do it in a way that's fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Booker. And now we are excited to share with all of you for the first time a short film produced in partnership with award-winning filmmaker Alex Rivera, which tells the story of Howard and Vanessa, two U.S. immigrants, both deported and one still trying to return.
My name is Howard Bailey.
My name is Vanessa Vaquis Mendoza.
I was originally from Jamaica. I was 15 years old when I came to New York.
I was born in El Salvador, and I left when I was 9 years old to the United States.
I signed up for the military. I got married. I started a family. And I started my trucking business. Things finally was looking up.
When I was 16, I got pregnant. My oldest son, Jason, he had Pompe disease, rare disease, didn't have no cure.
Get out there, Jason!
He used to be like, Mom, stop screaming so much because you embarrass me.
In 1995, I just got out of the military then, fresh, not even 6 months. And I get arrested for marijuana. My lawyer told me I had to plead guilty because it's Virginia Beach, I'm black, and I'm Jamaican. I didn't think that in 2010 that the marijuana conviction that happened 14 years ago would have came back and haunt me. About 5:30 in the morning, I heard a big knock on the door. Boom, 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 boom. And I opened the door. And then it was like, Howard Bailey? I was like, yes, sir, that's me. Did you apply for citizenship like 6 months ago? I'm like, yeah. And it was like, turn around, that's why we're here. I'm like, what? And they just grabbed me, man. And they just put the cuffs on me. And I was like, what's going on? He was like, yeah, you're getting deported. And my daughter came down and saw me in the handcuffs. She was crying and screaming and asking why they taking him. My daughter lost me. My wife lost me. My son lost me. I was separated from everyone that I love.
It was a day before Jason's birthday. I wanted to do him a little party. I went to the store with a friend of mine. She was like, oh, let's just take it.
A group of migrant women is coming forward with claims that they were the victims of unwanted and unnecessary medical procedures at a federal detention center in Georgia.
Surgeries were performed on several detainees without them fully understanding what was happening.
As a female, it feels like somebody just run you over and left you destroyed. That's how it feels, because it's something that they did to you and you have no idea. After surgery, I was bleeding every day. I was not getting no answers. I told my dad, I'm gonna sign the deportation. At least in Salvador, I can find a doctor that is going to help me and find out what's going on.
I was in Jamaica. Oh, man. I didn't know what to do.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Safety. We'll now turn to Mr. Bailey, who's participating virtually. Mr. Bailey, please proceed with your testimony.
I have now been living in exile for 8 years. 10 years if I include
the 2 I spent in immigration jail fighting my case. The last time I saw my home was 10 years ago. And since then, life feels like a total nightmare. Every day I hope that I would wake up and just be back home in Virginia again. And I remember going to the bathroom and looking in that mirror. I don't know who I was looking at. I'm just asking for a chance to come home to the country I love, the country I serve. The States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Thank you.
When I come back to El Salvador, I was like, Dad, I'm not gonna make it. Like, my God, what am I doing here?
When my mom got deported, it changed a lot in my life. My mom was responsible for my medicine, taking me to the doctor. I was just lost. I was like 15, 16 years old, lost. Everything went downhill.
I remember where I was at. I was in the country. The signal, the phone signal was not even working that good. They told me like, ICE looked over your case and they decided to overturn your immigration case. Oh my God, man.
Mr. Bailey fought for our country, and I'm happy to fight for him.
And I saw Brandon. When I left here, Brandon was this high. I'm back in the trucking business. Everything start coming right back. It still feel good to be out there. You get your mind free. You focus on the road. Like therapy to me, I feel I needed this.
It's hard because I'm not there. I gotta hear him through the phone. I gotta see him, like his voice. He doesn't sound like my baby no more. He sounds like a man now. And it's hard that I'm missing those special moments that I should be there. I hope that I do get a chance to go back and spend as much as time I can with my kids, to be there with them, to see them grow up and do things right.
We're gonna have to wait and see what happens in court.
We're gonna have to wait and see what happens. Hopefully everything goes good.
I'll be back there soon.
When I first met Howard Bailey by video, he had already been fighting for nearly a decade to return to the US. He told me he sometimes questioned his life and how he could keep living having lost everything. When I put the phone down that night, I thought of my own childhood in Virginia and my own immigrant family. I imagined what it might have been like to be back in 6th grade, like Howard's daughter, to wake up one morning and watch a gang of immigration officers without warning drag my own father from our home and arrest him on our front lawn only to lose him forever. But I also asked what dozens have asked me since we first shared Howard's story. Why was a guy who lived in the United States for decades and served in the US Navy deported for a single marijuana conviction? and why, even after receiving a pardon in a state that had legalized marijuana and with a Supreme Court decision and U.S. Senator on his side, was it so difficult to come back? And if it was so hard for him to return in the current system, what about the hundreds of others with more complex cases or without legal advocates, but who had experienced equally unjust deportations? Howard was one of 11 unjustly deported people featured in a 2021 NIJC white paper. The paper proposes that the government create a centralized process using laws that already exist to provide people like Howard an effective, fair, and swift chance to present a case for return. Since the paper's release, we have had small but significant policy wins. But more meaningfully, 6 of the 11 people featured in the paper have returned home to reunite with their loved ones. This is thanks to their own advocacy and the support of their sophisticated and relentless legal teams. We welcomed home Howard Bailey, Nault Lawrence, Jean Montreville, Claudio Rojas, Beto Gutierrez, and Isa Sao. But these 6 cases are unfortunately the exception. U.S. law does provide mechanisms for deported individuals to return home. But for most people, these processes are inaccessible or futile. Today, you will learn about 10 more unjustly deported people, including Vanessa from our film. Each of them has asked the U.S. government to use its power to bring them home. Vanessa, Gora, Tina, Carlos, Samuel, Asia, Juan Carlos, Paul, Ibrahima, and Leonel. They are leaders and advocates in their own right, who struggle every day they are separated from their loved ones and the only home they know. But before you meet our Chance to Come Home 10, I am thrilled to introduce United States Senator Alex Padilla, whose leadership has been pivotal in the creation of a new central process that helps deported U.S. veterans like Howard Bailey return home.
Hi, I'm Senator Alex Padilla, and it's my honor to join the National Immigrant Justice Center to demand better for people who are unjustly deported. As the proud son of immigrants, I know the enormous contributions immigrants make to our communities each and every day. And I also know the fear that exists for immigrant families who have seen just how quickly the government can deport a valued member of the community and leave a family devastated, often without hope for a timely return. Unjustly deported immigrants include community leaders, parents, small business owners, and even patriots who bravely served our country in uniform. Howard Bailey is one of those patriots. I'm glad that today all of you are getting to see Howard's story up close. I serve as chair of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and had the privilege of getting to know Howard when he testified at a hearing on how our immigration policies affect military service members and veterans. Howard obtained lawful permanent resident status, served 2 tours in Operation Desert Storm in the U.S. Navy, was awarded the National Defense Service Medal, and founded 2 small businesses before he was deported. Mr. Bailey fought for our country, and I was honored to fight for him. His story was one of many that led me to introduce the Veteran Service Recognition Act to prevent the deportation of veterans. I'm proud to have played a part in helping reunite Howard with his family, but too many other families continue to wait as their loved ones are stranded thousands of miles away. Your work at the National Immigrant Justice Center is often the best hope that they have. And I thank you all for all that you do. And I promise to continue to do everything I can to fight alongside you to reunite families.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. This year, through the newly established IMVETS process, the U.S. government has brought home many deported veterans through grants of humanitarian parole. While still imperfect, IMVETS is a proof of concept. We know the government can establish a central process to review requests for return. At NIJC, we are grateful to the founders and leaders of the deported veterans movement responsible for this significant victory. The National Immigrant Justice Center, alongside many legal and advocacy organizations, is proud and honored to introduce today our 10 unjustly deported people who are leading the call for a chance to come home. Their stories underscore that the U.S. immigration system is in shambles. It lacks legitimacy, flouts due process, and regularly separates people from their livelihoods and loved ones. But until there is political will to fix this, the Biden administration can take small steps right now to remedy the worst injustices. Today, alongside our Chance to Come Home 10, we urge the administration to create a central office to review requests from people seeking to return after deportation. They don't need a new law from Congress to do this. Current laws already include mechanisms for deported individuals to return home, but they don't work in practice. A central office, as we describe in our 2021 white paper, would allow people to actually access those mechanisms to correct bad deportation decisions. And this idea has a growing base of congressional support. Today, we amplify this ask alongside our Chance to Come Home 10. You already met Vanessa Vaquiz Mendoza, who survived unwanted, non-consensual medical procedures in a Georgia detention facility. She felt she had no choice but to accept deportation. An immigration judge agreed to reopen her case, but Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, still will not give her a chance to come home to fight her case and reunite with her 3 children. Alongside Vanessa, we have 3 Ohioans with decades of life in the US who were deported to countries in Africa. Ibrahima and Gora each sought asylum, but lost their cases due to bad legal representation. ICE was unable to deport them to Mali and Mauritania, so they both lived in Ohio for nearly 10 years, diligently checking in with ICE as required. They ran their own businesses, raised their US citizen children, and served as the primary breadwinner for their families. They had no contact with the criminal legal system. Then, under the Trump administration, ICE suddenly detained and deported both men without warning during a routine check-in. Gora left behind 4 children and a wife who faced homelessness and hunger because of his lost income.
Hi everyone, my name is Gora Nyai. I'm working as an electrician, residential, commercial, high voltage contractor. I'm calling from Senegal where I'm fighting for a chance to come home reunited with my family, 2 daughters, 2 sons. Thank you.
Our Chance to Come Home 10 also includes 3 Black men, each who served harsh sentences for drug convictions around the time of the US government's war on drugs. They remind us that the US immigration system doles out a harsh second punishment of deportation for most criminal convictions, and often years and years after the person served their time with no regard for rehabilitation or the time that has passed. After 30 years in the US, ICE deported Lionel to Panama on the basis of marijuana offenses that are no longer illegal under New York state law. He is one of thousands of people deported from the US for marijuana who do not automatically benefit from recent marijuana reforms and pardons. Deportation was a second punishment for Samuel, after he had already endured a disproportionately harsh sentence and worked hard at rehabilitating himself. He lived in Washington, D.C. for 40 years before his deportation to Sierra Leone.
Hello everyone, my name is Samuel Anthony. I'm sending this video from Sierra Leone, where I was deported on December 13th, 2019. I'm fighting a chance to come home to be reunited with my sister, brother, father, and daughter. On April 27th, 2021, my mom died, and unfortunately I wasn't able to be there. So I desperately would like to say an official goodbye to her. Also, I'm fighting for the chance to come home to continue my work as a CDL driver and uniting with Mentoring with Youth program with the kids in DC. Thank you.
And Paul Pierles, a New York financial planner who ICE deported to Haiti, despite the fact that he is stateless and had never once set foot in Haiti. Paul waits there now, living in fear for his life. Another New Yorker, Asia Serrano, one of 3 survivors of domestic violence in this campaign. When a New York law passed to protect survivors like her from excessive jail time resulting from domestic abuse, Asia was granted release after 17 years in New York prisons for an act committed under the coercive influence of her abusive ex-partner. But ICE offered no such grace and instead deported her to Panama.
Hello, my name is Aisha Serrano. I am living in Panama City, Panama. I am fighting for a chance to come home, to be reunited with my children and my entire family, and also to complete and fulfill my career as a software engineer.
Our Chance to Come Home 10 also includes 2 men who have critical legal decisions in their favor supporting their return, yet remain trapped abroad in dangerous circumstances. After 30 years in the US, ICE deported Juan Carlos Escobar to El Salvador, where his life is in constant jeopardy because he is a gay man. He was deported because he did not have a lawyer, and his immigration judge failed to inform him of a law that offered him protection. When Carlos Sauceda was 15, he committed a violent act under the influence of gang members. During his nearly 30 years in prison, he worked tirelessly to make amends for this horrible act. He renounced his gang ties and did exceptional work helping young people say no to gangs. Acknowledging his profound rehabilitation, the state of California granted him release on parole. But ICE detained and then deported Carlos to Honduras, where he could be killed at any moment for repudiating the gang that recruited him as a child. And so he fled to another country. Recently, Carlos won his immigration case before a federal court of appeals and the Board of Immigration Appeals. That's right, he won protection under US laws, but ICE still refuses to give him a chance to come home. In a moment, you will meet Carlos, who is joined by Tina Hamdi, the final member of our Chance to Come Home 10. Tina was a DACA recipient who lived in Ohio for 20 years. ICE deported her for a single criminal conviction that resulted from surviving domestic abuse. Tina's 2 young children remain in Ohio and live partly with her ex-partner. She worries for their safety and FaceTimes with them every day.
Being a teacher now and being around other kids and not my own, what it makes me feel is like it's like a bittersweet thing. It's like a blessing, but at the same time, it's helped me grow drastically. And my biggest hope is just to be able to go back and show my kids the woman that I've become.
Just stay strong, be positive, and we have a lot of people that's fighting with us, so we're not alone.
You guys made me feel like that there's a fighting chance, because I didn't think that I was on like this point right now. I didn't think it was even possible to start something like this. You know, I gave up a long time ago. I started to think to myself, at this point, I just want my kids here. Like wherever I have to live with them, I'm okay with that. Like because no mother should be without her kids.
I tell you, I feel your pain because I saw so many moms in detention just completely broken because of the separation with their children.
Things happen for a reason. And when it's time, it's time. And it's time.
And I think that there's amazing people that you see here today and all the others that you will meet. That's what they do. They give us hope, and therefore we will fight. And I just hope that soon, like you said, when it's time, that one day we'll sit across the table from them having coffee with your children and say, this is the fight, and we will continue to fight for others. So,
like you said, to be alive and to be well and have a fighting chance, that's the most important thing. We can only hope for the best in the future. And again, thank you all. And I'm so happy and blessed to have known all of you. And like Carlos said, inshallah, we will meet one day.
Thank you so much, Tina, Carlos, Howard, Vanessa, and our Chance to Come Home 10 for standing alongside the many unjustly deported people living in exile. Deportation is amongst the harshest punishments a government can impose, tearing people from their livelihoods and subjecting their loved ones to destitution. At NIJC, we believe that if you've built a life in the US, raised your children, started a business, have a home, if you've served your community or our country, if you have had contact with the criminal legal system, but have served your time, paid your debt to society, and shown exceptional rehabilitation, if you have won your case before a US court or have the law on your side, then no, you should not be deported. But if you are, then at the very least, there must be a way to make a case for return through a meaningful, fair, and efficient central process. If you support this ask at the heart of our Chance to Come Home campaign, visit our campaign landing page that you see on your screen and scroll to sign your name on our petition. While you're there, get to know our 10 deported leaders better. Read their stories and watch their video testimonials. If you have questions today or through the rest of our program, please use the form below this video to submit those, and we will respond immediately after our program. Now, I'm honored to introduce 4 people who are joining us for a live conversation on the efforts of unjustly deported people to return to the US and our Chance to Come Home policy ask. First, we're thrilled to have with us the Honorable Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, who represents the 5th District of Missouri, which includes Kansas City. He has been a representative in Congress for 18 years now, including serving as a past co-chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. He is co-leading a letter circulating right now in Congress that asks members to support a central process to give people a chance to come home. Congressman, thank you for being here. You have been a critical champion for those seeking to reunite with loved ones after deportation. Why do you feel other members of Congress should support you in this ask, and why do you think there's a moral obligation to do so?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is a subject that is extremely important to me because my family wouldn't be together, at least the one I have now wouldn't be together, but for the fact that my wife's grandfather immigrated into the United States from South America. And I think we are, whether we want to accept it or not, or whether we want to use it or not, we are first cousins with the world. This nation is connected inseparably by many bonds that go to many different lands, and what we want is a place in our country. We want to be known as a place of where justice and human rights are paramount. That it's not something that we like to talk about in movies, but that it is a part of who we are. And right now, there are families all across the United States who are struggling to just get by, and because there's some kind of hang up in our system, which is, by the way, awful. I was trying to think of an adjective that could do it. I'm not sure awful does it, but it is in bad it is badly in need of repair. And so we need to remove a lot of barriers, but we've got to accept the fact that our land is a land of justice and that we are a nation with our arms wide open.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I want to turn now to Samelia Anthony. Samelia Anthony and her younger brother, Samuel, arrived to the U.S. from Sierra Leone when they were young kids. ICE, under the Trump administration, deported Samuel after he had lived for 40 years in Washington, D.C., based on an old drug conviction for which he had already served time for, and after years of demonstrated rehabilitation. Last week, over coffee, Samelia shared with me as she celebrated the birthday of her late mother that it was heartbreak that had taken her mother's life because she could not bear her family being separated. We're so grateful, Samelia, to you for being here today. If you're willing, would you share with everyone a little bit about the day that you learned Sam was being detained and put into proceedings for deportation?
Thank you for the opportunity. I received a call from Sam on July 31st, 2019, that he had stopped in Virginia to do his yearly checkup that he always does as under ICE. We spent 6 months after they told him that they were deporting him within 2 weeks. We spent 6 months working with attorneys and nonprofits. We also reached out to members of Congress, unfortunately without any assistance, to attempt to stop his deportation. On December 13, 2019, while I was at the doctor's office with my mother, a task that normally would have been left to Sam, we received word that he was at Dulles and that he was being removed. After 41 years, excuse me, it's still very emotional, and it's just like it was just yesterday.
Thanks, Amelia. If you're okay to say a bit more, what would you say since then it's been like for your family without Sam, and what have your efforts been to try to bring him back?
We have constantly been working with, again, attorneys and nonprofits to bring Sam back. It has been 3 years and 5 months since he's been gone. And like I said, it seems like it was just yesterday. The efforts to bring Sam back has just been very challenging. You know, every area we reach, we realize that there aren't really programs or situations where we can express how it feels to lose a family member, especially one that isn't deceased, but is alive, but you just can't reach out to them. And I'm hoping that through this program and the efforts of Representative Cleaver and Mr. Jones, that we will figure out a way to be able to bring Samuel and the rest of the deportees back to home where they belong.
Thanks, Amelia. So clearly 3 years of efforts, before that 6 months up against the system. I want to turn with that in mind to Mondaire Jones, former congressman and current CNN commentator who's joining us today. During Mondaire's time in Congress, he led the call. He was the first to lead the call to the Biden administration for mechanisms to help deported people like Samuel return home. He fought particularly hard to bring home Paul Pierless, one of our Chance to Come Home 10, who ICE deported even though he had never once set foot in the country of Haiti, and after nearly his entire life as a New Yorker. Mondaire, thank you so much for being here and for your early championing. Could you share with everyone today why you felt compelled in that moment to advocate for Paul Pierless, and then the challenges that you faced even as a member of Congress, as an elected official in one of our highest bodies, in securing his return?
Well, let me start by thanking you, Nana, and Heidi, and the National Immigrant Justice Center for putting together this incredible forum today and this presentation. It's great to be with my former colleague, Representative Cleaver, and Samilia. Thank you for sharing what I know is a very painful story, but it is going to galvanize people to pay attention to this very important issue, and hopefully get so many more people returned who were unjustly deported. Like my former constituent, Paul Peerless. You know, I grew up in the village of Spring Valley, which is where Paul had lived the vast majority of his life, having come to Rockland County at the age of 5 years old. For all intents and purposes, it is the only place he had ever known. And so you can imagine my surprise when just a few days into my term in Congress, I received a phone call from an unknown number. And in that instance, something told me to answer it. Heard from Paul's attorney that he was about to be deported. This was, I think, January 18th. So we were in the final days of the Trump administration. And we know that they had a particular approach to immigration that was especially draconian and racist and inhumane. And moving very quickly and working through the night, I'm proud to say that my staff and I were able to prevent him from being deported. I think he was literally on the tarmac about to be flown out of the country before being pulled off that plane, is my understanding. But what happened afterwards was even worse from my perspective, because we had a new president as of January 20th, and there was supposed to be a 100-day pause on deportations. And unfortunately, we were unable to stop his deportation just a few weeks later in early February. Paul had the misfortune of having had a negative experience with our criminal legal system in his early 20s. But it shouldn't be that, 15 or so years later, when you're 40 years old, that you get deported to a place where you've never even been, where you're not a citizen, and where you've got no, real connections, and where the federal government has itself acknowledged is a particularly dangerous place in this moment. The president of Haiti having been assassinated, there having been earthquakes and famine, and to the point where I was, along with my colleagues, especially in the Congressional Black Caucus, were able to convince the administration to extend TPS for Haiti on multiple occasions over the past several years. And so, Paul, having been an upstanding member of our community in Rockland County, was someone who, it was a no-brainer that I would champion his return, and to be once again with his family and with other members of our community. In fact, the same community I'd grown up in and had a special connection to. And, to your second question, as a member of Congress, it was a new experience to have difficulty engaging with the federal agency like ICE, which candidly, was not very responsive to my staff who were seeking information, where we had difficulty scheduling a meeting with ICE for several months even. And that, again, was acting in apparent defiance of the president's own 100-day pause on deportations, because we know that those deportations continued during those first 100 days of the Biden administration. It was and probably still is a rogue agency, led and largely by people who had been holdovers from the prior administration.
Thank you, Mondaire. There's so much to unpack in what you've said. And I think a lot of what you describe about, Paul's experience himself and your experience advocating for him resonates with the experience of so many of the people we've heard from at NIJC and that our partners hear from, who are up against the system trying to come back. I want to kind of zone in, I've heard from Representative Cleaver about the moral obligation here. We've heard from Samilia about the pain and suffering imposed by these deportations, but it is still incredibly hard to bring people back, right? A member of Congress is up against this agency, up against this system, even when folks have clearly contributed to our communities and lived here for decades. So I want to turn now to Heidi Altman, our Director of Policy here at NIJC. Heidi has been leading our policy work here for 6 years, and around the beginning of the Biden administration identified that this was an area that needed more sustained federal advocacy, which led to the release of our 2021 white paper and proposal. So Heidi, I want to just ask, why is it so hard, if you can unpack that for our audience? There are laws that exist to help deported people return. There are hundreds of families seeking to reunite. There are amazing champions like Mondaire and Representative Cleaver, but it's still been so hard until now. Why?
Thank you, Nana. It's such an honor to be here today, first of all, with you, Nana, Samilia, Mr. Jones, and Congressman Cleaver. And it has been so hard. I can't imagine the courage and fortitude when I hear Samilia talking about the fight that she and her family have been engaged in for years. There are many obstacles and challenges that individuals have to overcome, some insurmountable, when they're seeking to overturn a past deportation. The first is just trying to figure out what is the legal mechanism that needs to be utilized to even apply to come back, and what is the correct procedure to trigger that mechanism. And let's just say that that is far from simple. For some, it might be a mechanism called humanitarian parole. For others, it might be moving to reopen their immigration court case along with a concurrent application for relief. These applications are costly and they are dense, and they're just really hard to figure out how to complete properly. Post-deportation law and procedure are notoriously complex, actually so much so that a lot of our colleagues, immigration attorneys, won't even touch it. But for those who do manage to figure out what to apply for and how to apply for it, the next hurdle is that in almost every case, an application to come back requires seeking an exercise of prosecutorial discretion from ICE. And for a lot of people, that's just the end of the road. Because in many cases, an application will get submitted and will just sit there. We just hear from so many people that they've submitted an application to return and never heard anything for months. In other cases, we know that an immigration attorney or adjudicator will look at the application, but it's just summarily dismissed. And this is an issue of agency culture. This is an issue of agency training and mission. And so that's why we've proposed this concept of a centralized unit to receive and review applications from individuals who are seeking to overturn their deportations and return. Because people who want to seek to come back to their loved ones should be able to figure out how to do so, and in a way that is understandable and that doesn't require a team of lawyers in every case. And I just want to say that again, because each of the 10 people, these 10 brave leaders you've heard from today, literally have a team of lawyers and in many cases members of Congress behind them, and they are still waiting to come back. They're still waiting for an adjudication. And on the government end, there needs to be a centralized, streamlined process where each application is really carefully considered and where weight is given to the stakes, because that's what we've borne witness to, all of us watching this program today, the very, very high stakes. And we see this as just part of good government. It's in the same way that across the country today, you see state criminal prosecutors standing up units to review past criminal convictions to identify errors or miscarriages of justice.
Thank you, Heidi, for unpacking our proposal here for everybody. Congressman Cleaver, I want to turn back to you for a moment. Could you tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, about the families that you've met over your years of leadership who've stayed with you, who would benefit from the kind of central process and good governance that Heidi's talking about to help return deported people?
Well, I can in many ways identify with what happened earlier when Samilia spoke to us about her family situation, because I have seen that in this country. I've seen it in this congressional district. But I have a story of Flo Vasquez, who immigrated to the United States of America as a minor in believe this or not, this is unbelievable, in the 1990s. And when Flo became 13, 15 years of age or so, he decided to return to Mexico for a few years, go and visit the grandparents and relatives that he had only heard about. And so in 2019, Flo had lived steadily in the United States since 2011. And the father of an 11-year-old boy and a 7-month-old daughter, who was also disabled. And he was the sole breadwinner of his family. And by the way, a top chef in Kansas City, Missouri. He had a popular restaurant in Kansas City. And then, just as things were getting pretty decent for him, his girlfriend was stopped, who was in the car with him, both of them, by ICE agents. And they were taking, as I recall, their daughter to a doctor's appointment when they were stopped. And the ICE agents smashed in the car windows. Imagine you got kids in a car, and a mob, from, these are my words, of angry individuals are knocking the window out of your car, and people are screaming. Well, it just so happened that somebody passing by had their phone and filmed exactly what was going on, and so the girlfriend, the girlfriend turned wife, I'm sorry, was just understandably petrified, and so the car was boxed in by law enforcement. You know how you see it on TV: cars behind, cars on the side, cars on top, helicopters on top of the cars, and dogs, Rin Tin Tin, Lassie, all Roy Rogers, everybody surrounding this car, and so they were arrested by the ICE agent, and the attorney claimed that their rights were violated, but as a result, they were deported to Mexico. Now, here they are. Let me calm down. Here they are in the United States of America, and they're thinking this is a land of justice. This is where if something goes wrong, if you're hurt here, you can expect this nation to make it right. It wasn't made right. They were sent to Mexico within 2 days of the stop, and so his family is still here, trying to raise those 2 small children, one with a severe disability. Now, if that's not injustice, if that's not a portrait of injustice in the United States, I don't know what is. And that story alone ought to make every American sick, because it's being done by an agency. I think my colleague said rogue agency, and I'm glad you used that term, because that's exactly what it is. And it needs to be completely shut down or overhauled.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And, this one painful story of injustice, as you say, should be enough. And what we have here today are 10 that we've presented, and hundreds of more that we hear about at NIJC and across our partners. We are short on time, so I quickly want to say, for those watching, we are recording today's event, so you will be able to play this for your communities and partners and colleagues. I want to quickly turn to you, Mondaire. Almost all of the people in our campaign are Black and Brown immigrants with years of life in the US who've been deported. Can you say more? And we know, of course, that President Biden has committed to redressing racial inequity through his executive order. So could you say more about why creating a remedy here to help deported people return is a matter of racial justice?
Yeah, just quickly, I think that there are 2 main ways in which this is an issue of racial justice. The first is, we know that Black and Brown immigrants in particular are disproportionately targeted for deportation and other punitive consequences or actions in the immigration space. You know, when people complain about immigration in our politics, for example, in terms of the rhetoric that they use, they're talking about Black and brown people, and I don't think there's any real lack of clarity around that. The other way in which this is a racial justice issue is that, you know, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the criminal legal system as one of the ways in which people get roped back into this deportation context. And we know that there are so many disparities for Black and brown people in our criminal legal system in terms of being overcharged and lack of access to counsel, the ways in which people find themselves in conditions that get them into trouble. And those get really imported into the deportation context, into the immigration context, when you have someone who is already in that space.
That's right. Thank you so much, Mondaire, for making that connect between the systems for us. Samilia, I want to give you kind of the last word here as we wrap our panel. I think I could stay here all day with all of you talking about this. There's so much that, you know, I'd love to unpack, but I just wanted to ask you, Samilia, what would it mean for your family to be able to bring Sam back through a process like this? And then now that you've been up against the immigration system, what do you want people listening today to leave thinking about?
Sam and I came to America August 8th, 1978 to be with family, which were our parents, our mom and dad. Families can't be whole with missing parts. Currently, Sam is our missing parts. I would like to leave the panel and everyone watching with the idea that Black people are not considered in immigration conversation. When I talk to friends about it, they're just shocked because for immigration, it's never been about Black people. I would like to make sure the conversation includes Black people as part of the deportation conversation.
Thank you, Samilia, for sharing your story and your family's experience. Thank you so much, Representative Cleaver and Mondaire Jones, for being here, but especially for championing this ask in particular and shedding light on what deportation means for our families and communities. The policy ask for all of you who are still with us at the heart of Chance to Come Home has been brought to life by the 10 deported leaders you met today who offer a snapshot of the hundreds around the world living in exile. And the policy ask we're making of the Biden administration is simple. It doesn't need Congress to pass something. It's something they can do right now with existing laws and procedures. And we've spelled it out for them in our paper. And we have hundreds of people around the world supporting us. So please join us, sign our petition on our campaign website, scroll down, add your name, follow me and NIJC on Twitter to reshare our call to action. As I wrap today, I want to thank quickly my colleague Nubia Fimbres, who was a critical part of bringing today's launch to life. And finally, as we close, I'm thrilled to introduce the Honorable Representative Espaillat, who is co-leading with Representative Cleaver and Trone and Senator Booker, a key letter in Congress to build support for a chance to come home. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to Representative Espaillat.
Thank you to the National Immigrant Justice Center for hosting today's event, and to the Chance to Come Home campaign for highlighting the reality of an unjust deportation which has occurred to far too many individuals. My own constituent, Leonel Pinilla, is in today's film. After living in the U.S. for 40 years, Leonel was deported to Panama in 2012 on the basis of a 1992 felony marijuana conviction. His conviction was later expunged in 2019. Despite this, his petition to return 4 years ago, Leonel remains in Panama today because DHS ineffective review process. Leonel and the many others who were unjustly deported from their families deserve due process from DHS. I, along with Congressman Cleaver, Congressman Trone, and Senator Booker, are leading a letter to DHS on behalf
of the Chance to Come Home campaign. Let's bring them home.
Thank you so much, Representative Espaillat, for your leadership on behalf of the unjustly deported and Leonel Pania in his fight for a chance to come home. Leonel and our Chance to Come Home 10 have inspired me and my colleagues here at NIJC with their resilience in the face of painful separation from their loved ones. In the challenging and politicized landscape of U.S. immigration policy, Chance to Come Home offers some hope and a small, tangible remedy for the injustices of a broken U.S. immigration system. Thank you for joining us today, and please stay in touch as we move forward together with action and asks for a chance to come home.